Hello, hello, how are we doing? Hey, raise your hand if tonight is your first time ever at youth group. Raise your hand. Wow, okay, a few of you. Wow. All right, hey, I am blown away at the amount of people that we have in this space tonight. Shout out, hey, you guys give a hand to the leaders who we don't have a seat for. There's a couple of them. Hey, thank you guys for showing up and showing out. Hey, quick question. How many people, just raise your hand, still have Thanksgiving leftovers in your fridge right now? Okay. How many of you, keep your hands up if you still have leftovers in there. How many of you plan on eating those leftovers still? Okay, so next time we do a gross game, like a food game, the ones of you who have your hand raised, leaders, take notes. Those are the ones that we need to get up here. Normally, I am the type of person who, after Thanksgiving, I look forward to Thanksgiving because I look forward to the leftovers. Normally, that's how I am. This year, though, I think I did one too many Thanksgiving Friendsgivings, and I'm kind of sick of Thanksgiving food at this point. That is until like 3 weeks later when we just eat all the same food, but we call it Christmas dinner instead. But it's really all just the same stuff. But like I said, I think it's a totally normal thing that you guys still have leftovers. And thinking about like what is normal, I wanted to play a little bit of a game with you all. I'm going to put some things on the screen, and if this thing has ever been normal for you, actually, if this thing has never been normal for you, I want you to say, that was normal? And so here's the first thing. How about a house phone? Raise your hand if you ever had one of these in your house. Yeah, so when I was growing up, it was really normal for a family to have one of these. In fact, me and my 6 brothers, we had a house phone that we all shared. And because we didn't know, when people were going to be calling, each of us would have like a time, an allotted time where we would have to tell our friends, hey, call me between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. And if they didn't call, you just didn't get to talk to your friend or your girlfriend that day. That's just how it was. So here's another thing that was normal. Dressing like this. Yeah, so if you guys can't tell, this is from our 80s night a couple years ago. Billy, is this your natural hair? That's your natural hair? You grew it out, you cut it out? Okay, so it was at a time normal to dress like this. And here's the other thing that we have. The next thing we have on our list is, I know the picture might be confusing. It used to be normal to just go to your friend's house and knock on the door and say, hey, is Johnny or Cannon, is he able to come outside and play today? How many of you, raise your hand, have ever not texted your friend at all, not called them, and just showed up to their house? Okay, so this is more normal today than I thought. Okay. I'm glad that is still a normal thing that we do. I feel like you have to make plans like 7 months in advance if you want to hang out with anybody, even if it's just for like 30 minutes of coffee nowadays. All right, now where are my leaders? Leaders, these next couple ones are for you because I feel like for the most part, the first 3 things that we've seen, those at some point in time have been normal or are normal for you, right? Well, here's some things that are normal today. Here's the first one, thrifting, right? So thrifting used to be this thing where you only did it if you literally didn't have money for anything else. But now it's completely normal to go thrifting. Literally like 90% of my closet, thanks to my wife, is just thrifted clothes. Now, like I said, it used to be not normal, but now it is. Here's another thing that is normal. For me, normal is just getting a call from Gavin pretty much every day. But here's the point. I think it's really normal, and this is shocking to me. You know how normal it is to just see a call like this and just ignore it? Like, not because it's Gavin. I love you, Gavin, wherever you are. But like I said, with the house phone thing, nobody was letting that go to voicemail because nobody knew when they were going to call again or who was calling in the first place. But now it's a completely normal thing to see somebody calling and be like, Sorry, nobody like hangs the phone up like that anymore. You just click the button. And then here's the last thing that's normal. Paying $200 for Crocs. Now, really quick, I want you to know something. Guys. I did not Photoshop this image. I went on StockX today, and there are literally Crocs for a car, like selling for $150. Lightning McQueen, sorry. Guys, I want to tell you something that maybe some of you don't know. Do you know you used to be able to go into a Dollar General and literally pay like $5 for a pair of Crocs? Like the same ones that you pay $60, you might pay $10 for a Lightning McQueen edition back in the day. But now it's completely normal, one, to wear them. Nobody used to wear them either. And now it's completely normal to pay the same price as you would for any pair of tennis shoes. And here's my point in saying and showing you all of these really silly, crazy things that used to be normal or are normal today. We as people, we make things normal, right? You can go through from decade to decade, year after year, and we decide and we kind of get to make up what is and is not normal. And now, tonight, what I want to talk about is not that we have made some terrible fashion decisions over the course of the years. I'm not talking about the Lightning McQueen Crocs, don't worry. I'm not talking about the fact that we have made really weird and outdated pieces of technology normal. But what I want to talk about tonight is interesting because it's one of the things that we talk about here that applies to everybody in this room, right? Some nights we talk about gossip or we talk about maybe getting angry, and it applies to some people, but other people are like, well, I've never really struggled with that. That's not really what I'm dealing with. But tonight, what we are talking about applies to every single student, every leader, us as staff, every person who has ever walked the face of the planet has dealt with or deals with this thing that we make normal. And the thing that we make normal that we're going to talk about tonight is sin. Right? We have normalized sin. We have gotten so comfortable to a point where we're just okay with it. We're okay with sin. And over the course of this series, Dirty Laundry, we've been talking about different ways that we try to cover up our sin. We've talked about how we try to hide it or we try to lie and get away from it and run away from it. And what we've done is we've kind of equated those things to what would it be like if we did that with our dirty laundry? What would it be like if we did that with our sin? And so for normalizing it, I want everybody to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine with me for a second. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to picture yourself in your bedroom. Okay, just picture yourself in your bedroom, it's clean. Some of you, that's like you don't even know how to imagine that. And now that you're picturing yourself in your room, I want you to picture dirty clothes all over the floor. Now, hold on. We're going to get somewhere with this. I don't want you to just picture them on the floor. I want you to picture them on the dresser, overflowing out of the drawers, coming out of the closet. I want you to picture yourself wearing those dirty clothes that are mounted up in your bedroom. And now, hold on to that thought. And now I want you to imagine that that's a completely normal thing to do. Some of you, you're like, the middle schoolers, like, that is normal. I do that every day. Right? But for everybody else who has any sort of understanding, that is not normal. In fact, it's actually disgusting. Some of you, when I said to just imagine there being dirty clothes on your floor, I didn't even get to you wearing them. You were like physically uncomfortable at that idea. And while I think that we can joke and be disgusted at this idea of dirty laundry being all over our room or on our bodies, I think that we have become strangely comfortable with sin being all over our life and what we wear on a daily basis. Like weirdly comfortable. Sin is the thing that separated us from God in the beginning. It's the thing that keeps us separated from him. It is literally destroying our life, and yet we are more uncomfortable wearing a t-shirt that hasn't been washed in a week than we are committing sins every day. We have become weirdly and strangely okay with that. And so what we are going to do tonight, we're going to talk about how to address and fix this problem. Because whether or not you came into this room believing it and whether or not you believe it right now, normalized sin in general is a problem, and it's a serious problem. Romans 6:23 tells us that the wages of sin is death, and so we have to address this problem of normalized sin by answering two questions. Number one, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where it's completely okay and it's completely normal to sin and not think twice about it, not be adamantly fighting against it? And then number two, where is it leading us? Because again, whether or not you believe it, the decisions that you make, the lifestyle that you choose to live is leading you somewhere. And so we're going to answer these two questions. One, how did we get here? And two, where is it leading us? And what we're going to do is we're going to look at a character, a person in the Old Testament who maybe some of you have never heard of. I asked last week or 2 weeks ago, how many of you had ever heard of David and Bathsheba? Some of you haven't even heard that story. And so this story is connected to that. We're going to talk about a guy named Jeroboam. How many people have never heard the name Jeroboam in their life? Wow, more of you than I thought have heard that name before. Okay. So this story is in 1 Kings chapter 12, and what we're going to do, I'm going to give you 3 really quick things to kind of give some backstory up to 1 Kings chapter 12. So Jeroboam was a son of a servant, and he was told by God that he was going to be king over part of the nation of Israel. So he's told by God he's going to be king, and then King Solomon, who was actually the son of David, he dies, and his son Rehoboam becomes king, because that's just what happened, right? The king dies, whoever his son is, the next in line, he becomes king. Well, what happened, there was a situation you can read about in 1 Kings 12 where Rehoboam kind of got on the wrong side of some of the nation of Israel. They decided to break off, and they made Jeroboam king. And so here's where we find ourselves in 1 Kings chapter 12. We have Jeroboam, who's king of the nation of Israel, and we have Rehoboam, who's king of the tribe of Judah. Everybody tracking with me? All right, there's your background. That's all that I'm going to give you. Now we're going to get on to the story. So, you're welcome. All right, so we're going to start reading in 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 25. Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and he lived there. And from there he went out and built Penuel. So he's building a couple of these cities. And then it says in verse 26, Jeroboam said to himself, the kingdom might now return to the house of David, or the house of Judah. If these people regularly go offer sacrifices in the Lord's temple in Jerusalem, then the heart of these people will return to their king, or their lord, King Rehoboam of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to the king of Judah. So we see here, Jeroboam is just now starting to lead this nation of Israel who broke off and made him king. And we start to see a little bit of the inside of Jeroboam's heart and mind here. Right? God had promised him, he says, hey, you're going to be king over this nation. And he says, hey, if you do the things that I've told you to do, if you follow my commandments, then this is going to be the case for generations to come. But Jeroboam, he understands that. He sees that it's started to happen. He's got part of the king, and then he starts to doubt a little bit. He doesn't trust that God's goodness, God's faithfulness is going to keep him as king. And so he starts to worry. He starts to say, well, what if they go back? What if they like the other king more than they like me now? And what if they kill me? And so I think now, even just in the beginning of Jeroboam's story, we start to see some similarities between Jeroboam and ourselves. Tucker quoted earlier when he was praying over the night, John chapter 10, verse 10, where Jesus says, I have come so that you may have life and have it abundantly. And that's a promise by Jesus for his sheep, the people who he has called to himself. And I think much like Jeroboam, I think we hear that, and maybe some of you made a decision a while ago or recently where you said, oh, I'm going to follow Jesus. And then I think the longer that time passes after making that decision and hearing that promise from Jesus, I would ask, do you really believe that? Based on your life, based on the things that are normal, the things that you do, are you truly believing that the life that Jesus has called you to is the abundant life? And I think, unfortunately, much like Jeroboam, we start to doubt. We start to think and we start to see people who aren't believers, who aren't living the faith that they should be living out. And they start to say, well, I think that actually sin, and I think that the things that I'm comfortable with, the things that everybody else is doing, I think that's actually what abundant life is, right? It's not what Jesus tells me it is. It's not what I've come to know, but it's actually probably something else. It's probably sin. And we start to believe lies that Christianity is just a bunch of rules meant to keep our life in line so that we don't misbehave and don't talk during worship. And we think that that's the full extent of the abundant life that Jesus has to offer. And so this is what leads Jeroboam to begin normalizing sin. And I think it's what leads us initially to normalizing sin. We begin to doubt Jesus' promise of abundant life. And so here's the first thing that we see Jeroboam do. In verse 28, he says this, so the king sought advice. Now, on the outset, this sounds like a good thing to do, right? You want to go get advice, but we just read earlier, who did Jeroboam talk to about all of these worries? He talked to himself. He didn't go and ask people like, hey, is this a rational thing for me to think? Like, should I be worried that the whole kingdom is going to automatically, just randomly rise up and kill me and go back to the old king? Is that a normal thing? There was nobody there, so he talked to himself. And so when it says that he sought advice, he was just looking for an affirmation to do the thing that he had already set out to do. Jeroboam wasn't interested in hearing anybody's opinions on whether or not he should make a better decision. And I think this is the first thing that leads us to normalize sin. You see, we normalize sin because we make ourselves the authority. We make ourselves in charge. It's the first cause of Jeroboam normalizing it, and I think it's the first cause for us too. Because you see, here's the thing. If I'm in charge, if you are in charge, you don't have to change anything. There's no submission required. There's nothing that you have to change in your life, nothing that's bad, nothing that's good. It's just what I want to do, that's what I'm going to do because I'm the authority. And it reminds me an awful lot. Grady, do you have that basketball? I should have had him sit up in the close, but it reminds me of when I was younger. He's getting around. It reminds me of when I was younger, and I grew up with a family of about 5 younger brothers. And I don't remember if it was a birthday or a Christmas one time. You think you can hit me from right there? Got it. Perfect, good job. You guys give Grady a hand. And it reminds me of when I was younger, and like I said, I don't know if it was a birthday or Christmas, and my little brother got a basketball. He was really excited. He was probably like 4 or 5 years old. And so he's starting to play, and he wants me to teach him how to play basketball. Okay, I know some of the rules. I'm not very good, but I can teach you a little bit. And so, we're going outside. I'm like, okay, you need to dribble. You gotta shoot. If you shoot for back here, it's worth this many points, whatever. And all the while that I'm trying to teach my little brother how to play basketball, this is him. And he would walk around and do all these things, and I'm like, no, that's not how you play basketball. That's a double dribble. That's a travel. I don't even know what that is, but it's not okay. And as I'm trying to teach my little brother how to play basketball, because that's what he wants to do. He wants to play basketball the right way, but instead of listening to the rules that are already set in place, he does this thing, and I remember where he grabs the ball, he says, my ball, my rules. And he walks away. And he doesn't actually want to learn how to play basketball. He just wants to be in charge. He wants to be the authority. And I think that we can laugh and I can look back at that. I think, man, that's ridiculous. You didn't make basketball. You don't get to come up with the rules. I don't care if it's your ball. And as ridiculous as that sounds, how often do we do that with our lives? We say, my life, my rules, and we forget that Jesus was the one who created us in the first place. Jesus was the one who said, okay, I'm going to allow you to breathe today. I'm going to allow you to walk. I'm going to wake you up so that you can follow me as a child of God. We forget all about that and we say, my life, my rules. I'm the authority. I get to say what is and isn't okay in my life. And if you're not okay with that, then so be it. And we storm away from the rules and the instruction that Jesus has for us, that is good for us, that's the right way to live, the same way that a child does when you're trying to teach him how to play basketball. So my life, my rules. And so we normalize sin because we make ourselves the authority. It's what Jeroboam did here. He says, I'm going to be the one to decide what we should do as a people. We keep reading, and it says that Jeroboam, he sought advice. And then he made 2 golden calves, and he said to the people, going to Jerusalem is too difficult for you. That's too hard. That's too far away. So here are 2 golden calves, and here are the gods who brought you up from the land of Egypt. He set out one in Bethel and the other in Dan. I don't know if Jeroboam just didn't pay attention in Sunday school class, but the last time a guy was like, hey, here's a calf, here are the gods, it didn't work out. And so Jeroboam's like, hey, going back to that place, and all the time he's trying to trick these people, right? Because he knows that if they go back to that place, they might follow Rehoboam. And he's like, hey, that's too hard. And here's the second reason that I think we normalize sin in our life. We normalize sin because it's effortless. It's easy. It's not hard to normalize sin. It's what comes natural to us in our fallen state. You see, what people love today, guys, is convenience. Convenience, right? You see it everywhere. Our whole world is built around being the most convenient, fast, easy thing, right? Fast food was already easy, and now you don't even have to leave your house. You can literally just wait until the food is outside your door, and then boom, there's fast food. We make 3, 4, 5 lane wide highways that go above random neighborhoods just so we don't have to go through, and we can go an easier way and get there faster, a more effortless way. We make phones that eventually are going to have like 17G so they load things before we even think of them. Right? We want things to be easy and fast. And look, There's nothing inherently wrong about wanting things faster and wanting things easier. I'm probably going to DoorDash some food tomorrow. I don't know. And while I think that there's nothing wrong with doing those things in certain areas of life, I think there is a problem when we try to bring this fast, no cost, simple, easy, effortless mindset into our walks with Jesus. I'll give you some examples, right? Don't take time to read your Bible. You know what's easy? How about you just read the verse of the day? 5 seconds, whole lot less than 15 minutes. You're gonna have way more time to get way more other things done. That's the easy way to do, right? Hey, just say the joke. I know it's probably inappropriate and you're probably gonna have to cuss to really get the point across, but you know what? It's easy, it's natural, it flows a lot better when you cuss in it, and guess what? Everybody's gonna laugh. It's effortless, it's easy, just do that. Hey, just stay at your boyfriend's house. Your 7-minute away home is way too far and it's way too late. Just stay there. That's the easy thing to do. And I could go on and on. I think of countless other examples of ways that we decide to take the easy way out, and what happens is we begin to normalize sin in our life simply because it's effortless. We normalize sin because it's effortless. It comes natural to us. And here's the last thing that I think leads us to normalize sin. We normalize sin because it gets celebrated. People like it. We can read the next couple of verses in Jeroboam's story in chapter 12, and what eventually happens in the next 3 or 4 verses is Jeroboam makes an entire religion. There's festivals around these calves. There's things that these people, they start to normalize sin as a culture because that's what we do. We celebrate it. We have festivals about it. And I think it's so similar to our world today, guys. See, we're living in a time, you are growing up living in a time where there is as little resistance to your sin as ever. You can go out into the world. If you want your sinful, normal lifestyle to be celebrated, go to anybody in this world. They are not hard to find people who will celebrate your sin with you. You can look out in our world today, and what does our world celebrate? It celebrates inward authority. Hey, you be true to you, your truth, live that. That's what we're all for that. It celebrates following your heart, following your feelings. Hey, you just, like I said, be true to you. Hey, that's what's good for you. It celebrates the easy, simple, come to church on Sunday, Wednesday, don't do any work outside of that. Make sure that you're good so that your parents aren't mad at you and your friends think that you're one of those Christian people. But, behind closed doors, you just do whatever you want. The world celebrates the ability to be hypocritical. It celebrates hypocrisy. And look, while I think being celebrated is already way too high on our list of priorities, and like I said, it's not hard to find people, it's not hard to find places in the world that will celebrate your sin, there is a hard truth that I need every person in this room to walk out of here knowing the world does not care about your eternity. It will celebrate you until the end of the day, the end of the week, until the end of your life. It will celebrate all of the decisions that you want to make that are easy, effortless, what you want to do, but it does not care whether or not you spend eternity with or without the Father. It really doesn't. And so the call that we have on our lives as believers is to love the world as we walk in righteousness, but we're not seeking to be celebrated by it. We love the world. We are in it and we are not of it, and we don't look to be celebrated by it. And so these are the things that lead us to normalize sin. When we make ourselves the authority, when we take the easy way out, and when we look to be celebrated, that leads us to a lifestyle where sin is normal for us. And I think many of you know those things. You know that that's why you're in it, but let me tell you where it's leading you. Because I think whether or not you know it, I know some of you are in denial of it, of where it is leading you. And so let's talk about it. When we normalize sin, we lead others to sin. It's result number one. That's where it's going to lead us. We read in Jeroboam's sinful decision to create these idols, right? It was a sin for him to make those golden calves, but then it says it became a sin for the people. It became a sin because they started to go to them. They started to worship them. They were a part of these festivals. Let me just tell you, go a quick summary of how the rest of the kings after Jeroboam were. They were evil, 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 and then one of them started good, and then they ended evil. Evil, 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 evil. It was one evil king after another, and where did it all start? Jeroboam. It started with him normalizing this sin, and then for generations to come after that, it was all evil kings. And then we get a nice little summary in 2 Kings chapter 17. You can go all the way to the next book. And it says, when the Lord tore Israel from the house of David, so when the kingdom split and Jeroboam became king over part of it, it said, then Jeroboam led Israel away from following the Lord and caused them to commit grave sin. The Israelites persisted in all the sins that Jeroboam committed, and they did not turn away from them. That's the summary of Israel because of Jeroboam's normalizing of sin. Y'all, we are super selfish. Like really, really selfish. And we're not just selfish because we normalize sin, although I think that pride is a result, like it's something that leads to that. But we're selfish because we think that our normalizing sin, the sins that we have in our life that we are okay with, we think that they don't affect anybody else. If you're an upperclassman, will you stand up? Junior or seniors, will you stand up? I want to speak to just you for a second. Everybody in this space tonight looks up to you. Whether or not they will admit it, there are things and habits that they pick up on that you live out. And we talk a lot about, hey, we want you to come up and share your transformation story. We want you to be loving Jesus. We want you to be living the way that you should. And they're looking up to you for those things, but they're also looking up to you to see how you treat the sin in your life. If you're okay with it, then they're gonna be okay with it. And so you have to be thinking consciously, how am I treating Jesus? How am I thinking about what he has done for me on the cross? Am I just allowing this sin to persist and be normal in my life? Or do I hate it? Do I think properly about it? You guys can have a seat. And so again, they are looking up to you guys. And so when we normalize sin, and it's not just the ones that I had stood up, I could have everybody in here stand up because one person or more look up to you. No matter who it is in this room, there is somebody who you know who looks up to you and will follow in the example that you set for them on how you love Jesus and how you hate sin in your life. And so when we normalize sin, we lead others to sin. The second thing that is an effect of it is we become numb to all sin. When we normalize one sin, just any sin in our life, when we allow it to persist, we become numb to it. I was thinking last night, how many of you have ever burnt your hand on like a stove? Or maybe sipped some coffee that was too hot or ate something that was too hot and you got burned by it? Okay? Now, when you burn your hand on that stove or burn your mouth, what happens is there are nerves that get burnt so you can't really feel things properly. And if you get burnt enough, seriously enough, you won't be able to feel anything at all in your hand. And I think that's the same exact things that happen. That's the same exact thing that happens when normal sin remains in our life. What happens is our spiritual conscience, the way that we feel, the conviction that we have about sin begins to lessen and lessen to the point that we don't feel conviction about it. To the point that we don't feel bad about it. But let me tell you something. If you burned your hand to the point that you could not feel anything on it, if my hand was burned to where there was no nerves, I wouldn't feel anything, could I just leave it on a hot stove and be okay? No, I couldn't. But I have to rely on other people around me telling me that my hand is on a hot stove. And here's why I say that, guys. Because I cannot tell you the amount of conversations that I have had with people where they say, hey, I think this is a sin in my life, or that a sin gets called out in their life, and they go, well, I just don't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about watching that or listening to that or doing that. Like, I don't feel bad about the sin that I'm doing. I don't even think it's a sin. And my question is, how long have you allowed that to go? How long have you allowed that sin to persist? Because here's the reality, guys. Just because you don't feel conviction over sin does not mean it is not destroying you. Just because you don't feel bad about something does not mean that you should not ignore, or you should ignore the crowd around you that is telling you and warning you to walk a different direction. But that's what happens when we normalize sin, we become numb to it. We allow ourselves to become numb to all sin. And then here's the final thing. When we normalize sin, we don't pursue Jesus. And I don't mean that we don't just kind of pursue him. What happens is we begin to stop pursuing him. I want to read a verse that we've read twice already tonight. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. It says, therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every hindrance, thing that holds us down. Maybe it's not a sin explicitly, but hindrances are just things that cause us to not pursue Jesus fully. And the sin that so easily ensnares us. And let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy that lay before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne on God. I'm not good at math. Just gonna be up front. But I want to do some backwards math here, right? So if this verse tells us that the way to focus, fix our eyes, and pursue Jesus is to lay aside hindrances and sins, then what do you think putting on those things is gonna do? It's gonna cause you to not be able to focus on Jesus the way that you ought to be. Instead of having endurance and being encouraged in your walk, the opposite takes place and you're tired and you're worn out. And I think that's where some of you find yourself tonight. I think some of you find yourself tired because you've been walking around with this sin in your life, with this normalized, okay sin that you have. I think you're worn out. It is exhausting, man. You're feeling far from God. I'm not saying that this is the only reason that we doubt God's goodness, but I do think that it is a reason. Having sin that persists and is normal in our life, when we allow that to remain, then we begin to question the goodness of God. We become apathetic. We don't want to do the things that we're called to do. We don't want to get on here and share the way that God has transformed our life, because in reality, we might be able to get up here and talk about it for 10 minutes, but we're not being authentic with it. We have sin in our life that we have normalized. And we begin to wonder if that promise of abundant life that Jesus told us about was all a lie. If it was just a ruse to try and get me in the door and get me to talk about some things that I'm struggling with in small group. If that was the only reason that I gave my life to Jesus, then what is this all for? And we begin to ask ourselves those questions, and we begin to doubt God's goodness and his faithfulness. And so I would ask you, what sin have you normalized in your life? If you have notes, write it down. Think about it. What sin have I normalized in my life? And if you're struggling, you're like, I don't really know what certain sins I have going on. The Bible is very gracious in giving us, God is very gracious in giving us the Bible with a couple of summaries of some sins, some works of the flesh. And we see two sections. In Galatians chapter 5, it says, now the works of the flesh are obvious. These sins are obvious: sexual immorality, moral impurity, promiscuity, idolatry, sorcery, hatreds, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, selfish ambitions, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and anything similar. And we see in Colossians chapter 3, another summary of some sins. It says, therefore put to death what belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desire, greed, which is idolatry. So we're seeing a lot of the same things. Because of these things, God's wrath is coming upon the disobedient. And you once walked in these things when you were living in them. We keep reading, but now put away the following. So he gives us a little bit more: anger, wrath, malice, slander, filthy language from your mouth. Don't lie to one another. You see, I would ask you, as you look at these lists, as you hear these things rattled off, what are the things that are on these lists that you're not sensitive to? What are the things that are on this list that you know very good and well exist and run rampant in your life that you are okay with? What is the sin in your life that you have allowed to become normal? And are you aware of where it is leading you to? I told you, it's leading other people into sin. It's leading us to not focus on Jesus. It leads us to become numb to sin. But here's the reality: sin is leading us to death. Romans chapter 6 tells us that we're a slave to something. We're either a slave of obedience, which leads to righteousness. And for some of us who are walking with Jesus, who have been saved by him and sealed by the Holy Spirit, that is what we are doing. We're walking in obedience and righteousness. But if you have not been saved by Jesus, if you have not submitted your life to him and are following him as a child, Romans 6 also tells us that you're either a slave to obedience, which leads to righteousness, or you're a slave to sin that leads to death. There is no other way about it. And so I would ask you to ponder that tonight. Have I submitted my life to Jesus? Or am I submitting myself to the sin that is in my life? The Bible is also very clear on how we should treat sin, how we as believers should look at sin. Galatians chapter 5 says, now those who belong to Christ Jesus, they are not okay with sin. They don't normalize it. They are not accepting of it in their life, but they crucify the flesh. They kill it. They get rid of it. They get rid of all of the passions and desires, not just the sin, but they get rid of everything else that causes them to fall into that sin. And if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. You can read the rest of Galatians chapter 5 where it talks about the fruits of the Spirit. They live by the Spirit. They keep in step with love and joy and peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. See, that's what we as believers keep in step with. And if that's not the reality in your life, if you have allowed sin to become a normal, okay, everyday part of it, then I would encourage you today, there's two things that you can do as you walk out of this space tonight. Two things that I would encourage you to do before you go anywhere else outside of this building. And that's number one, find somebody to confess it to. Get it in the light. Get it in the light. Talk to somebody about it. And then don't just talk about it, but we repent and we turn away from that sin and we keep in step with the Spirit. We walk the walk that Jesus has called us to do, which does not include normal sin, but what it includes is normal worship. Romans 12, 1 and 2, we worship God with our lives. So I would pray for the believer in this room that you would be encouraged to do that, to find sin in your life, to be okay with ripping it away, to not want to hold on to it. And then I would encourage you, if you don't have a relationship with Jesus, stop submitting to slavery and sin and believe that the promise of abundant life that Jesus has for you is true and it is what is good for you.